most notorious sex predators ever in the United States of America. And they asked him, they said, what made you target or what made you go after a specific child? He went after boys, girls, black, white, Hispanic. It didn't really matter. He went after them all. There wasn't a specific demographic he focused on. The most amazing thing he said, I looked at the father. And if the father wasn't a threat, I would go after that child. That blew me away.
Welcome to the Mountain Tough Podcast, brought to you by Sig Sauer. What's up, everyone? Welcome back to another episode of the Mountain Tough Podcast. I am Dustin Diefenderfer, CEO of Mountain Tough, and we are so glad that you are here diving into these episodes week after week. It is our goal to bring you an inspiring guest every single week, someone who will help you level up, focus on your mindset, so that you can add tools to that mental toughness toolbox so that you can pursue that abundant life and that always ready lifestyle. If you are a new or a loyal listener, and if you have a second today to leave us a ranking or a review, those do mean the world to us. They mean a lot to the Mountain Tough team. I love seeing those come through on how we can improve and what you guys want to see. Additionally, through the algorithm, those rankings and reviews do allow these episodes to get out to more people and transform more lives. Additionally, if you did not know, as a Mountain Tough Podcast listener, as a listener to this show, you do get the chance to try Mountain Tough for free for 6 weeks. All you need to do is enter the code MOUNTAINPOD. That's all caps, MTNPOD. Mountain Pod will allow you to get on the Mountain Tough app for 30 days plus the 14-day free trial. So that's 6 weeks of free training as our appreciation for you being a listener of this show. It's a great way to check out the app if you haven't, and it's a great way to check out our mental, physical, spiritual, nutritional programming. In 6 weeks, you can see really everything that we have to offer. So all you need to do for that is go to mountaintough.com, click start free trial, and check out with that code MOUNTAINPOD. Transitioning now to today's guest. I was really excited about the opportunity to bring him on the show. A lot of you guys out there have been seeing me wear this Crush Evil hat and have been asking me where I got it and what it is all about. The Crush Evil hat came from this organization that Jared Hudson is the CEO of. He is the CEO and founder of Covenant Rescue Group. Formerly, he was a Navy SEAL, and now he is running Covenant Rescue Group, which is a nonprofit fighting human trafficking and child exploitation, but specifically in the United States. On home soil, they are in the fight. And this is a conversation you do not want to miss. You do not want to miss this conversation, especially if you have children. The details that we get into, the specifics are mind-blowing. They are disgusting, but we do get into a lot of detail around how we can protect our household, how we can protect our children, things that we need to be thinking about as parents. So stand by for my conversation with Jared Hudson. I listened to one of your podcasts prepping for this show and heard you talking about how you were doing some work overseas like in Uganda and Zambia.
Yeah.
And are you doing any of that anymore?
Yeah, we still do. So we met with I always say the president, but it's not the president. It was they call it something else, the permanent secretary or something like that in Zambia. Anyway, some high-level government official in Zambia originally reached out to us through another buddy of mine who does some work over there with digging wells and everything. I'm trying to think, his organization is AGI, Archangel Group. And so he does work in Africa. They reached out through them and basically said, hey, we want Covenant Rescue Group to do in our country what they do in the United States. So part of what we do is build a package for state and federal law enforcement. I'm a state law enforcement officer, and I'm a federal law enforcement officer as a TFO with Homeland Security. So we help local agencies build out a successful package for child exploitation primarily. And so when they got caught wind of that in Zambia, they asked if we could do that. So we went over, met with them, studied their federal laws. Everything in their country is federal. So think of it this way. If you look at Africa, let's think of Zambia specifically. There's like 21 million people in Zambia, maybe not even quite that many. There might only be about 18, but it's about the size of Florida. If we're looking at a state to think about, it's about the size of Florida. So when you think of an African country, most of the time our mindset goes to the United States of America, a couple 100 million, 350 million, whatever it is, people, right? I think, what do we have, 340, 350 in America, a million folks. It's not like that necessarily in your African countries, especially sub-Saharan Africa. It's more like states, right? So Zambia is its own country, but it's really like the state of Florida. When I say federal law, we think of our U.S. federal law and everything, and then you have all your own state individual laws. It's not that way. When we say federal law, it just is the law that governs those 20-ish million people in that country. Again, it's a big area, but there's not a large amount of people. I think trying to think what the population of their main city is. Lusaka is about 3 million maybe. And that's generally where you would see a lot of the child trafficking stuff. So we kind of worked around the Lusaka area. We bought a few girls, interviewed a few girls. Their laws are a little bit different than ours. Prostitution is, legal there. So it makes it, and prostitution, like a 16-year-old is, of legal age. So there's some different things you have to go through. So that's why we spend time studying their law, meeting with their officials, and helping them put together a plan to do that. So we have worked there. We worked in Israel after the October 7th thing, obviously, children being taken. Our big thing is human trafficking, in particular child exploitation. So we did support that. Previous to what we do now, we worked in South Sudan with far-reaching ministries. We got about 1,900 people out of Afghanistan after the shutdown with far-reaching ministries. And, that's something we can talk about if you want to. We actually did an ibex hunt to make that happen. That was our cover. The best thing about a cover that's true is that it's true, so we were able to get over with all of our sniper gear and everything, do an ibex hunt and in the Badakhshan corridor and get people out that way. So we did that. And then we worked in Haiti a good bit before the president that was assassinated a couple years ago. We actually worked with that administration, or however you would want to call that, that group, that president that was there. There were quite a few Americans on the ground. The CIA was there. That's how I got connected with them. I had some buddies with the agency actively there working, and they called and said, "Hey, man, there's a human trafficking piece here that y'all would probably like to be a part of." So we went in and worked with them for a little bit as before the country went, complete disarray. And so that's
crazy.
That would be our overseas work, but our primary focus is here stateside because of our law enforcement credentials. Everybody on our team sworn, and we help states or local agencies build a solid state case on individuals who are strictly looking to buy or sell people, in particular children. And the reason in particular children is because when a child is involved by federal law, by almost, I think, all 48 of the 50 states' laws, and by the definition itself, when a child is involved, it's 100% of the time it's human trafficking. And what we see here in the U.S. is primarily sex trafficking. We do see probably the larger thing would be labor trafficking, and that has to do with open borders and all that stuff going on now. You see a lot of labor trafficking. That's still the largest piece of human trafficking there is. Not that we don't focus on that, but generally speaking, if we tap into the sex trafficking, we find a criminal nexus that allows us to impact the labor trafficking, and then overseas allows us to impact the organ harvesting, because that doesn't happen here in the U.S. as much, but it does happen overseas. So that's kind of in a nutshell our overseas work, and then our stateside work, and then we primarily focus here stateside with local law enforcement.
And is the Is the difference overseas pretty substantial of what you're seeing stateside? Is a lot of the overseas more in those like worn torn areas a different issue?
Yeah, I mean, so I would say yes and no. That's kind of it's not really a hard question. It's more, it depends on how you're viewing it, I guess. At the overarching grand scheme of the picture, no, sex trafficking is sex trafficking. And let's use Ukraine as an example. A buddy of mine sent me a text. He's in Ukraine right now. I've got a lot of buddies that are there actually fighting with some of the volunteer units, the Ukrainian volunteer units. Regardless what the media tells you, Ukraine is getting absolutely crushed. They are losing massive amounts of men, and they're losing the war to Russia. I mean, that's, without getting into the politics and, the war side of it, Russia's winning the war of attrition that they always win, for lack of a better word. Doesn't mean that the Ukrainians ain't fighting hard. Doesn't mean that the volunteers that are there with them, guys that I know, buddies of mine, ain't fighting hard. They most certainly are. It's just a numbers game. And when you see that start to happen, and this is why I like using Ukraine as an example, they've lost so many men, and the men are the ones conscripted to go to war, right? Women and children, they could leave the country. It was illegal for anyone 18 or older that was a male to leave the country. They had to stay and fight. So you're losing so many men that now these women and these kids are in a position to where daddy's gone, daddy's dead, whatever it is. They are put into a position to where mama's got to feed the babies. Well, mama's got one thing that works for her. There's a reason that the highest paid person on OnlyFans is a female, right? And we all talk about wage gap stuff. Well, dudes ain't making as much on OnlyFans as chicks are. Well, there's a reason for that, because that's what women can provide. So without casting judgment or talking negatively about the female that finds herself in a position to where I've got to take care of my babies. I'm in a war-torn area where it's not what we have here in Western society, where all women are equal and they can go get a job as a nurse or doctor. It just doesn't work that way, right? There's one thing that women can do to provide for their families, and that is where you generally see in overseas areas, especially war-torn areas, human trafficking taking place. A lot of it is self-induced because of the circumstances. I'm going to be impoverished. My babies are going to starve unless I do this. And that would be the front end of it. That's not always the case, but that's the front end of what we see overseas. That's that general overview. Here stateside, you still see the poverty-based thing, but I would say more often than not, drugs are involved regularly. And it's not some guy that's trafficked a girl and got her involved in drugs. Most of the time, it is a girl at some time in life, whether she was a victim, maybe victimized as a child, whatever it is, there are drugs involved, and they're doing things within the drug world. You ask any law enforcement officer, and it's very rare that you find real human trafficking victims that are not heavily involved in the drug world. And when you do find those victims, most of the time they end up being killed by whoever takes them. It's almost like it's a kidnapping and a rape, as opposed to a kidnapping. We get them hooked on drugs and now we traffic them. Does that make sense?
That makes sense.
Yeah. So that's the difference.
Yeah, it's mind blowing, and I think it is difficult for a lot of Americans to understand that. I don't have much experience, but my wife and I worked in Uganda for a couple years, and a lot of the kids that we were trying to rescue were coming out of that Joseph Kony war cycle, and there's many instances where the kids' families and the kids themselves were a lot of times lying to us that they were orphans just because they wanted to get some help. And like coming back home and sharing those stories with our friends and family, it was difficult for them to believe that a mom and dad would send their kid off claiming that they're an orphan just so that they could live a better life than they were currently living.
Well, that's right, and you're hitting the nail on the head that a lot of people don't see. We see it in Haiti. I've seen it in Uganda. I've got a buddy in Uganda. Ben is his name, but anyway, He was in Joseph Kony's army as a kid. He watched his
Mm,
parents killed in front of him, and he had 7 brothers and sisters. I don't know how many girls or how many boys, but I know he told a story when Joseph Kony raided their village. He was 11. He carried his 3-year-old brother out on his back, and his
jeez.
3-year-old brother was actually shot. If he hadn't been carrying his three-year-old brother on his back, he would have been killed. But his 3-year-old brother was shot as they were running away. They lived homeless in the villages for a while. He told a story. It's an amazing story. You're talking about somebody that's really suffered something. Now, I will
Mm,
tell you this. He also said to me, he said his exact words. I might even have it recorded. If I do still have it on my phone, I'll send it. He said, "I'm not a victim." He said, "I'm a born again believer in the person of Jesus Christ. Jesus Christ was the only victim ever on this planet, and I'm not him,
jeez.
but I'm saved by him." Man, that blew
Man.
me away to hear him say that, to hear his story, captured by Coney, forced to fight in the army, rescued by the South Sudanese military, and he serves now in the South Sudanese military. So with all that being said, everything you're laying out, that's exactly what we see in sub-Saharan Africa. That's exactly what we see in Uganda, South Sudan, Zambia, even not South Africa as much because it's definitely more first world. Zambia is still pretty first world, but you still see it going on in Zambia, Tanzania, a lot of those
Yeah.
areas where the copper belt is up into Congo, cobalt mines. Haiti, you see that going on in Haiti. Ukraine, you now see it in Ukraine. Afghanistan, we saw it there, especially after the pullout when the Taliban came in and took back over. You see parents, you see it in Mexico. Parents
Mm,
will literally pay people to take their kids. They'll pay them because they think that their kids are going to have a better life. It's not that their parents are selling the kids to make money or doing it nefariously. They're doing it out of
mm,
love because their life is so bad. That's how bad their life is. Every day is so bad that this small glimmer of hope, this small opportunity might be a way that our kid gets out of it, gets to America or whatever it is. And guess what? When they do that, that's why you see all these kids crossing the border right now. Cartels buy them from families who are legitimately thinking, wow, my kid's going to
better
have better
life.
opportunity than I do. It's a point of sacrifice on the parent because they're in such dire straits. Everything looks like hope. And we have evil men and women, not just everybody thinks dudes. No, women are very prominent in this, but evil men and women who purchase these kids and then they use them in that way, whether for sex trafficking, organ harvesting, labor trap, whatever it is, to get across the border right now. That's what a lot of them use them for as their kids. So that's what we see, and you're hitting the nail on the head. Parents sell them, and it's not nefarious. It is them trying to do something good for their kids. That's not always the case, but especially overseas, that has been more often the case that I've seen, at least.
Yeah, and I think it's insane and it's really difficult for a lot of Americans to understand that. I mean, could you imagine how difficult things would need to be for you to justify paying someone to take your daughter somewhere just because you think that somewhere's a little bit better than your house? And that's the reality for a lot of people.
There is nobody in America, no matter how impoverished you are, and I've seen a lot of impoverished people. We serve warrants on, on a lot of people who live in unbelievable squalor. There is nobody that I have ever met in the United States of America who has suffered that much of a plight that they're willing to sell their kids because things are so bad.
Mm,
That's what we live in this first world country. Even though a lot of the areas we have in this country, they look like third world areas. They look like Haiti. They look like Africa, and people live impoverished, no doubt. But the opportunity is here to where people are not having to sell their own kids. The folks that we see here selling their own kids, and we target a lot of them, is people who are doing it for their own financial gain. And it might be because they're in poverty, but they're not doing it with a good heart. They're doing it
mm.
because they want more money for drugs, they want more money for alcohol. They want, it's, and they do this to, you know, may for self-induced purposes. It's not that they were born in unbelievable poverty and they have no opportunity. They do it strictly for self. And I'm
Yeah,
just telling you
it's
what I've
different.
sine. I'm not giving a job. I've like stuff that we work every day. and that we're a part of. So somebody will get on here and argue with me, no doubt, but I'm not saying anything that I've heard regurgitated from the news or another podcast. This is what we experience in the line of work we do.
Hey guys, I just wanted to take a second and talk to you about nutrition and supplementation. There are a plethora of options when it comes to supplements that can be kind of overwhelming, so I wanted to let you guys know what I do take. So in the mornings, I am taking the Mountain Ops greens and the collagen right when I wake up, and that has been a game changer. I don't eat a lot of vegetables throughout the day, so adding those greens in the morning is quick and efficient, and I can really feel the collagen. In addition, I do enhance my workouts. My Mountain Tough training sessions are quite difficult, and so I do like to take the Enduro. It gives you a cardio enhancement that you can actually feel. And then I also like a little caffeine with my workout, so I'm taking the Mountain Ops Ignite. Lastly, it's really important that you are getting enough protein and recovering after these difficult sessions. What I do know is even following a strict whole foods diet, I'm not getting nearly enough protein on most days unless I take a supplement. So I do take the Mountain Ops protein after my workout to make sure that I'm hitting about 1 gram per body weight for a functional athlete. So taking the Mountain Ops protein with some creatine after my workouts has been huge. Those are the products I am taking and that I recommend. The Mountain Ops team is giving Mountain Tough podcast show listeners an exclusive discount to their products. It is a great deal. So for a first-time purchase on mountainops.com, you do get 20% off. All you need to do is go to mountainops.com and then use the code MountainTough at checkout. That's MTNTOUGH. All caps, all one word. Apply that as your promo code at checkout, and you're going to get 20% off your first order. You've been listening to the Mountain Tough podcast. Well, I want to transition there for a while to stateside. We just did just like a small Mountain Tough marketing campaign over the last week, and it was titled America, We Need a Talk. And we used a lot of shocking statistics, mostly from the fitness realm, just to wake people up a little bit. But only less than 40% of American males, under the age of 40, can do one unassisted pull-up right now. It's almost 70% obesity rate right now in America. Divorce rate's over 42%. A drug addiction rate is obviously extremely high. But I've been excited to chat with you, highly excited, because most people, I don't think, know much of anything. The general public does not know much detail or specifics around what is going on in America when it comes to child exploitation and human trafficking. So if you had the chance to focus on that topic under the umbrella of America, We Need to Talk, what would you let people know?
Yeah, I would. I'd say the first thing I would say is, we don't see what we've seen. I'll try to, and maybe I can send it and you can show it on the podcast. When it goes out, I'll send you a video of, people selling kids in bags in northern Zambia, southern Congo, Africa. We went over there, we met with people. Some people were saying, hey, yeah, this is real. Some of the guys in Africa were saying, hey, this was staged for some, YouTube likes. Never saw it on YouTube. We just had it sent through the threads. And, but for all intents and purposes, it was, they were bagging kids up, selling them for labor purposes. And it was a lady that was doing it. All of that, being said, we don't see that here in the United States of America. Nobody's going to show up in a free candy van and snatch your kids. Now, does that happen? Yes, it does, but it's extremely rare. And it's so rare that when it does happen, you literally have local, state, and federal law enforcement agencies burning an area down to find that child that was taken uh, from their family. So it's extremely rare in the U.S. But what isn't rare, what's not as rare, is our children's digital footprint. And you give your kids a cell phone, you give them a computer, a tablet. If it has access to the internet, it has access to the world, and the world has access to them. We're even seeing now with predators coming in on these gaming devices where you
Yeah.
can talk back and forth on these games. And those are really hard to monitor because there's not messages, there's not pictures sent, but they will literally talk your child out of your house. And we see that happening more and more to where they're not having to show up and steal a kid. They steal your kid's mind, and then they get them. And it might be a 3 or
Jeez.
4 year period. And when you see a child's mind that's been taken, I can't tell you how many. There's a guy that's sitting in training just down the hall over here from where I'm sitting at. Uh, his son, he was dealing with the same thing with his son. An example I'll give: my nephew uh, is how old is my nephew? 13. He might be 14 now. He's 13 at the time. And he had some lady in her 30s or whatever, mid 30s, sending him some smoke show, sending him nude pics. On his phone that
Insane.
he had, that I was telling my sister, telling my dad, I'm telling everybody, hey, look, telling my brother-in-law, hey, he don't need that phone. But they say he's got to have a phone. And she's sending him these nude pics. You think he's telling anybody? Heck no,
Mm.
he ain't, right? And anybody on here listening is like, oh, well, he ought to say something. You obviously don't know a 13-year-old boy, because I can tell you, Jared Hudson, who's a born-again believer in the person of Jesus Christ, saved by grace. I can tell you right now, as a kid, even a kid that followed the Lord, if I'm getting those things, I'm
Hmm.
probably hiding them. I mean, it's an attack on my mind. And so he's
Yeah.
messaging back and forth, and finally his mom finds out about it. Well, we do some research and digging. It's a Palestinian dude out of New Jersey. The guy down
No
the hall
way.
that I was talking about, that's he's with the FBI, and he had the same thing going on with one of his kids. They find out that it's a man, some man from India, I believe is where the country he was located in, that was chatting with his kids. So they might not even be trying to steal your child from your house. They might be trying to steal their digital footprint, because that's so valuable now, right? Especially to
Hmm.
the technology world that we live in. And they'll also get credit card information. They'll get bank account information. They'll get your Cash App, or your what's the other one that my wife, Venmo. My
Hmm.
wife's always like, oh, I got to send Venmo. I'm like, golly, if I don't even know how much is going in and out of Venmo, but I have no doubt I'm
Yeah.
losing money on this.
Yeah.
So,
Yeah.
but they get all of this information, and that's how they hack your life. And before you know it, they take a kid, because kids are dumb. We're all dumb, but I mean, kids are really dumb. And you got the 13-year-old boy who's getting nudes from this chick. She's like, hey, I need a credit card because I need this. So what's he do? He steals mom's credit card from her purse, sends it to her because he's got him a girlfriend sending him nudes. And because
Jeez.
kids do those things. So that's something that we see pretty common. And if it's hey, we need to have a talk, or we need to wake up, just realize, when you give your kid a device, when you give your kid a device that attaches to the internet or cell service, 5G, whatever it is, you give the world access to your kid, and you give your kid access to the world. They don't have to show up in a free candy van to steal it. They don't have to live on your street. They could
Hmm.
be, 3,000 miles away and steal your child's mind. And when they steal your child's mind, it is very hard to get that child back. And your
Yeah.
kids will resent you for it. We see a lot of that. We see kids resenting their parents because they see something going on and they have to put a stop to it. And I would also say it's not just for teenagers or anything like that. It's, 5 and 6 year old little girls. We had one somebody reached out recently, and it was a game she was playing with her cousins, but some guy had gotten on it, and he was sending messages and talking to their 6 year old daughter.
Jeez.
So I'm telling you, man, that is the most dangerous thing that is at our fingertips right now. And if you want to have a real conversation, a lot of people get mad at me when I say it, but you better monitor. And I mean, monitor really well. You better monitor your kids' internet, cell phone, laptop, iPad, all of the things that our kids have. You better monitor it, because people are going after it. Hey, and in marriages, again, in your
Mm-hmm.
marriage, would you want your wife hiding messages or being messaged by some dude that you didn't know about? Heck no. And we
Yeah.
see that happening all the time with social media, ex-boyfriends or ex-girlfriends or whoever getting involved. And before you know it, there's an affair happening and it's destroying marriages. I just thought of that because you mentioned the 40% divorce rate, I think. Um,
Yep.
you have to keep a close rein on this technology, especially with our kids. So that'd be the first thing. The second thing that I mentioned that really pisses a lot of people off, but it's very true. I'm in Alabama, right? We have Roll Tide, right? You got Alabama, University of Alabama, one of the biggest party schools in the nation, football, all that good stuff. Well, what do? Our daughters, we use women because they're more easily trafficked. Again, they're more easily victimized than men are. It doesn't mean that men are not. It's just that's the demographic that's generally victimized is a female demographic, not a male. Um, at the of age level, let's put it that way. 18, 19 years old, we send them off to college. We send them with money. They party, they drink on the weekends, they do whatever they want. And you got all these stupid Me Too movements and everything. But the fact of the matter is we allowed our daughters to go down and get drunk and make dumb decisions that people make when they're drunk. And then all of a sudden, we want to pitch a fit because something bad happened. She got pregnant. She
Mm-hmm.
got raped. Oh, let's make abortion okay because this lady made a bad decision, and without getting into all the politics of it, if you get to the root of the root of the problem is we're given responsibility to those who should not have responsibility. Our kids should not have the responsibility of having to decipher good or bad on technology. We're
Yeah.
there to be an umbrella of protection for them. Our kids at age 18, 19, 20 should not have to decipher, hey, uh, should I go in and drink? Am I going to be able to make a good decision to do this? No, because as an adult, we don't make good decisions when we drink too much, right? And now you're
Mm-hmm.
sending that kid and giving that child responsibility to do it. And what's going to happen? Well, now we're going to have an unwanted pregnancy. Now we're going to have a possible rape. Now we're going to ruin multiple people's lives. Now my daughter might be taken. And so in the world that we live in, so when you look at it, it's really our responsibility as adults. It's our responsibility as parents, but we don't want to take that responsibility. We want to pass it off on everybody else as opposed to saying, what have I done for my kids? So when people say, hey, what do I look for in human trafficking? There's a lot of things you can look for, but are you monitoring your kids? Are you monitoring your
Mm-hmm.
kids' usage of media devices? Are you monitoring your kids if they're of age that they're out on their own a little bit, making sure they're not out drinking too much or even at all and making dumb decisions, making sure that drugs are not involved? Or are you enabling that by giving them money and letting them continue to do these things until they completely destroy their lives? And so, sorry to go off on the tangent on that, but generally
No, that's
speaking,
great.
what we see here in the United States of America stems from those things that I just mentioned. Digital footprint, and then when they're of age, digital footprint still becomes a problem, but alcohol and drugs. Those things that we're not monitoring as parents have created more issues for us, I believe, over the past 30 years than probably we've seen in at least the lifetime of the United States of America.
And you gotta have the confidence in the strength and security as parents, I think, based on everything you just said, to really be counterculture. I mean, you got to be countercultural in not having phones for the kids, not getting phones for the kids. And then especially the college thing, it not only is the partying happening all across the country, it's almost encouraged by a lot of parents. It's
Yeah.
encouraged like, hey, you're going, enjoy the tailgates. And so to really stand firm and hold fast and protect your family, you have to have the strength to look different than everyone else most of the time.
100%. And it's you're not your kids' friends. And that's the problem with, I would say, our generation. I don't know how old you are, but I would say our generation, maybe our parents' generation, is we've wanted to be our kids' friends. You're not your kids' friends. You're your kids' parents. And that's a heavy responsibility, especially me as a Christian. And I would say there's a lot of Americans that would say they're Christians. Jesus says if you lead any of these little ones astray, it'd be better off if you had a millstone tied around your neck and thrown in the ocean. Now, I've been passed out underwater before. That's part of, Bud's training, right? It's been passed out, shallow water blackout, and that's not a great way to go. And that's what Jesus is saying. It's better off that you be drowned than you lead a little one astray. And well, guess what? You have little ones. Even if they're 20 years old, even if they're 30 years old, they're still your little ones. They're the ones that God has given you to care for, to protect, to provide for, especially as fathers. And it's very important for us as fathers to realize, and as mothers, is we're not our kids' friends. You're not here to be your kid's friend. You're here to be your kid's parent. And do it in a way that would honor your family. If you honor God, but let's say you don't believe in God, at least honor your family and prolong the life of your child. And don't get mad at the system when something bad happens to your child, but you put zero things in place to make sure that wouldn't happen. There's a guy, and I'll get Stephen maybe to send it over to you when we bring it. I forget his name, but he's one of the most notorious sex predators ever in the United States of America. And they asked him, they said, what made you target, or what made you go after a specific child? He went after boys, girls, black, white, Hispanic. It didn't really matter. He went after them all. There wasn't a specific demographic he focused on. And the most amazing thing he said, I looked at the father. And if the father wasn't a threat, I would go after that child. That blew me away. He didn't even look at the mother. He looked at the father, and if the father wasn't a threat. So I've started telling him, hey, be a threat. That's a good thing. If you're a dad, be a threat. You got stay dangerous in the background of your thing up there, right? Be dangerous. Be a threat. Don't give in to the system. Don't capitulate to the system that wants to take your child and harm your child. And I believe that that's what the enemy's come to do, steal, kill, and destroy, because as a Christian, that's what Scripture tells us, and I believe that it's 100% true. But let's set that aside. The world that's out there, they don't want the best for your child. They want to use your child. Don't let the world use your child. Raise your child up in a way and put protections in place in a way that elevates your child so that the world can't use them, abuse them, and destroy them, but that they would succeed and go on in society in a successful manner as opposed to an unsuccessful manner. And again, we're seeing that go on right now. Kids with parents who are lazy and don't care. The parent that would sell their kid because there's a glimmer of hope to get them out of poverty, and they accidentally sell them into trafficking, they are held way less accountable than the parent who wants nothing or needs nothing and lets their kid go off and party at college, drinking on every weekend, doing whatever their kid wants to do when their kid's not even old enough or responsible enough to understand if I drink too much, do I even need to drive this car? Does that make sense? I guess I feel like I'm going on a tangent, but
yeah, it's a good talking point, because we talk all the time about complacency and passivity and what it's doing to men in particular. And most people go, when they hear that, they go to the thought of, maybe I'm not fit because I'm complacent. Maybe I'm not reaching my life goals because I'm complacent. But they don't tend to think of the ripple down effects it's having through their whole entire household. And I think that's very connected to staying dangerous. And staying dangerous is that danger inside of you is harnessed for the right situation, but it's there if you need it. It's there if your family's in danger. It's there if there's a traumatic event. It's there if you roll over in your truck on the way home and got to pull some people out. And so much of that is about being physically and mentally prepared and staying sharp. But a huge part of that too is protecting your family, and protecting isn't always physical. A lot of times it's just paying attention to what's going on.
Well, and in our society, right now, it's not, yeah, physically you protect your family, but a lot of times that's not so much there. Something happens. My, my little girl, falls and breaks her arm and her leg. We pick her up, we carry her to the doctor. If it's bad enough, we call an ambulance. Somebody shows up. So, I'm not having to physically actively do something. We can call somebody to help with that. That's the benefit of living in a first world society. If I'm
Mm.
out of town and I'm not physically there, but somebody breaks in my house, say I'm on my Ring door camera or whatever, I can call 911, call a buddy with the sheriff's officer, whatever it is, to show up and deal with that, even while I'm out of town. So you're exactly right. It's not all physical. But it's making sure that those safeguards are in place uh, so that they can be taken care of, and then also their mental and their spiritual upbringing or growth as well. And it doesn't stop.
Yeah.
An interesting story. We don't see this much, and it's almost convicting. It's definitely convicting to me. I read it this morning. Um, in the book of Esther, right? The first three chapters of Esther is the story of how, and I'm sorry, I keep cutting back to this, and I know I've said it a few times. I'm a born again Christian. You said that y'all are, sort of a spiritual growth entity, not just the physical aspect, but also
Yep.
spiritual, right? Scripture says that um, physical, ability or shape is good for little, right? But what's the more important thing, right? The kingdom of God, the spiritual, Matthew 6:33, seek ye first the kingdom of God.
Yep.
So I think it's powerful to hear what you're doing. Yeah, the physical is good for a little, it says it, but the most important is spiritual. And so I'll always refer back to scripture because I believe that's the truth that I have to stand on as a Christian. And when I say Christian, I mean Jesus came to this world, lived a perfect life, died, rose again on the third day for my sins and yours, and it's through him we're set free. That's the simple and beautiful thing about the gospel. It's nothing that I've done. It's everything that Jesus Christ did. God
Hmm.
reincarnate, right? In the beginning was the Word, and then that's First John, or that's John chapter 1, and then verse 14 of chapter 1, the Word became flesh and dwelt among men. And that's what I believe. I believe Jesus Christ is God reincarnate on earth, and it's through Him that we have to view the lens of our life and through His Scripture. So in the Old Testament, the book of Esther, the first three chapters, it says Mordecai is sitting outside the gate and he hears that the king, so we know the story. Anybody doesn't know the story, Esther, Queen Vashti disobeyed the king. She's outcast, and then the king picks Esther to replace her, right? I mean, that's
Yep.
just a real quick rundown of where it is. So Esther is the queen now. This woman is the queen. And her parents died, but her uncle Mordecai was raising her. He's still sitting outside the city gate. He hears that there's an assassination attempt on the king. I believe this is chapter 3 where it tells this. And he tells Esther, he says, Esther, this is going to happen to the king. Esther takes it to the king. The king is saved on the assassination attempt. The guys are going to try to kill the king. They hang on the gallows. And that's kind of that part of the story. But it's interesting to see Esther was going to see her uncle Mordecai. Even as the queen, she would still go out and see him. And it said a very, very important piece that I think we miss a lot of times in our culture. It said that Esther still listened to Mordecai as she did when she was young.
Hmm.
This woman is the queen
Yep.
of the greatest kingdom on the earth, and she still gives the man who raised her, who is basically a father in her life, because her
Hmm.
parents had died, she still gives him the respect and the honor that was due him as the queen listening to him. I think oftentimes we miss out on the fact that, our parents, even though they might do things that we don't agree with, they are wise because they've been there. And maybe their
The
wisdom
wisdom.
doesn't come through anything they say. Maybe we learn from their mistakes. Maybe
Hmm.
your parents were evil people and did terrible stuff to you. It doesn't mean that you can't learn from it. And it's important for us to be that same wise figure or individual in our children's lives and raise our children in a way so they come to us and they listen to us in the way they do when they're young, right? That's I just thought that was unbelievably powerful because
That's
she's a
unreal.
queen
Yeah.
and
Yeah.
she still listened more. And the king was saved because of that. We're missing that totally in our culture. Uh,
Hmm.
Nobody respects their parents. And it's the first commandment dealing with people: honor your father and mother. Ephesians 6:1, obey your parents in the Lord, for this is right. Even if you don't believe or agree with scripture, you can agree that that's a good thing to do. That's a
Yeah.
right thing to do. And that, I would say that that's the biggest problem. And then for parents, the accusation that's leveled against you, and this creates human trafficking. Parents who put themselves in a position to where their kids look at them and don't think that they're deserving of that honor. Okay.
Mm.
Now, it doesn't mean your kids might be mad at you and they might hate you because you hold a standard. That's just the way people are. I'm not talking about that. I'm talking about your kids will respect you when they see that you hold a standard because you love them, because you want the best for them. And most of the time, we see women, young men caught up in human trafficking that they don't have anybody that loves them, or the people that were loved them were duped, like you see the folks overseas paying somebody to take their
Yeah,
kids.
man.
That's it.
How much of what you see do you feel is spiritual and demonic?
100% of it's spiritual and demonic. Obviously Ephesians chapter 6, you get to, obviously I said verse 1 earlier, honor your parents in the Lord, for this is right. And then it talks about honoring your masters, whether you're a slave or whether you're free, whether you're the owner or whether you're the person who is owned. Honor the authority or the hierarchy that God's placed in your life, not as if you're doing it for that person, but as if you're doing it for God, right? And then it goes into the next thing. It says, put on the full armor of God, Ephesians chapter 8. And it says, our battle is not against flesh and blood, but against principalities, against spiritual forces of darkness in the high places. When we see that right there, it's telling us physically where we need to fall into the hierarchy that God's placed over us, because the assault is coming from the spiritual side. It's not so much that my parents are doing a terrible thing to me because they won't let me go where I want to go, or my boss is a terrible boss, or in that time, I'm a bond servant and I've got a master. My master is dealing poorly with me. What it's saying is God will deal with them, but you have to operate as if you're working for God
Yeah.
by obeying that authority and that hierarchy, because the spiritual forces, that's where they get a stronghold or a foothold in your life. If there's bitterness, if there's the idea that you're a victim, if there's the idea that you can't get out of this, they'll take hold of that. They'll deceive, they'll create bitterness, and they'll continue to destroy. And that's why it puts that first in Ephesians 6. So I 100% believe, because scripture tells us this, and I've seen it personally with what we work with in my own life, that it is spiritual. It's 100% spiritual, right? The things of this world are just a shadow to what eternity is. That being said, we still see the issues here in the physical. We
Yeah.
see the spiritual impacting the physical, and you know, how do we effectively do that? I believe it's through prayer. I believe it's through the work that you're doing, that we're doing, that maybe pushes the physical and the spiritual together. Anybody we
Hmm.
rescue, we have we have certain organizations that have programs set up for them, not just physically, deal with the rape, the trauma, a lot of times the uh, like detox type period, right? And they have to go through
Yeah.
that from drugs and all, but also the spiritual aspect after that. And then once they get set there, revisiting the physical aspect, because, okay, we've got all this done for them, but now we send them back out into the world and they don't have a job. They don't have anywhere else they can go to. What's going to happen? Recidivism. So
Nowhere to
I
go.
believe that you have to have a merging of the physical and the spiritual. And we see that in, again, what I believe in the person of Jesus Christ. God became man, right? He merged the spiritual and the physical by becoming flesh here on earth to save us of our
Yeah.
sins. So I believe we have to do that. So yes, 100% spiritual. However, there is the physical aspect that we can't remove. And I would say that would be an accusation that I level against people from my cloth or background, or from the churches. A lot of
Yeah.
times we're so focused on the spiritual that we miss the physical. Now, on the other side, I do see a lot of people that are so focused on the physical that we never deal with the spiritual. So the problems continue to exist. These
Yeah.
things are merged together in our life, and we have to treat them as such.
Yeah, they're so connected. They're connected 100%. When did when did you feel the calling? When did you know that this was the work you were called into?
Man, I don't know if there was ever a call per se. I left the SEAL teams in 2014, well, end of 2013 into 2014, going through kind of a med retirement process. So uh, I left the SEAL teams and got into law enforcement, and I'd obviously been to war, OIF, OEF, so it's Afghanistan, Iraq, Yemen. I mean, been to war all over, and multiple deployments, and seeing the terribleness of war. But it really wasn't in the SEAL teams that I experienced. This is what a lot of people think. Oh, you've been all over the world as a SEAL and you experienced it. There might be some guys in the teams that experienced it, uh, but I know that I didn't. I didn't see it until I got into law enforcement, and then started doing that side of work that I saw, one, stateside, but two, also when you go to other countries that might be war torn, but we're not in, like Iraq, right? You don't have the big green machine like we were in Iraq or Afghanistan or wherever else there's a U.S. presence.
Mm-hmm.
Starting working in some other countries and seeing some other work that people were doing, and it's like, wow, this is an unbelievable problem that exists. The Lord opened the doors with a few organizations, and most of those organizations are no longer, they no longer exist. I work with OUR, which is a pretty popular organization. They don't do many live operations now. I talk with Tim Ballard every now and again. I think last time I texted him was probably 6 to 8 months ago. They supported an operation we did in, where were we at? Not New Mexico, but oh yeah, New Mexico. We're in New Mexico. So they support an operation we did out there with a sheriff's office and a PD, and so they're still in that mix of things. The whole Sound of Freedom thing and all that. But
Yeah.
um, the Lord just laid on my heart, my wife and I's heart, that hey, you're receiving money from people. What do I do with it? I have a business. What do I do? We talked a little bit about this before the podcast started. And talked to my CPA. He said, hey, you need to start a nonprofit. So 2018, we took some money, started the nonprofit, and got our board put together, went through it. I'd finished my MBA at the time, so I at least had an understanding of how to form what we wanted. Was kicking
Yeah.
around foundation, the different, qualifications for each thing. And so we just did a standard 501c3 nonprofit, got our determination letter from the IRS in 2019. So we've been doing this for 6 years, or five years now as an actual 501c3. And the Lord has just grown it. And I don't know if it was ever a calling. It just kind of happened. I
Yeah.
can't put my finger on it. It just kind of the Lord kept opening the doors and we kept walking through them. I ran for sheriff here in this county that I live in, Alabama, Jefferson County, Alabama. It's the largest county in the state, the largest sheriff's office in the state. At the time, it was the 26th largest in the nation, I believe, and that's out of 3,100 sheriff's offices. So it was a 1%er sheriff's office.
Hmm.
So it was a large run. It was the size of our county. It was, size of a congressional race, right? You got about 712,000 people in a congressional district. You've got, about 750,000 people in this county. I don't think we quite have that much, but it's the size of a congressional district. So that was a big political race. I didn't talk about what we were doing with Covenant Rescue Group, still running the business, running the race, and lost to the incumbent Democrat by 2% of the vote. So very close, out of like 200,000 votes. I
Close.
lost by like 7,000, I think, or 7,500, something along those lines. And so very tight. And so I just gave everybody like, hey, what are you going to do? I'm going to go back to what I'm doing, what I was doing beforehand. Lost the race, going to go back to what I was doing beforehand. And a lot of the people that supported the campaign were like, hey, why didn't you talk about this when you were campaigning? I didn't want it to
Yeah.
become political because we have real cases going on, And
Yeah.
Mike, I mean, in the middle of the campaign, we had a guy we rolled that showing up for a 14-year-old girl, but he was having sex with his own 18-month-old daughter and making videos of it and selling it. So he was producing and distributing child porn with his own child.
Jeez.
And so if I don't want to negatively impact that case, that's not political. This is real justice. And so
Mm-hmm.
we didn't talk about any of the cases or what we do with a nonprofit, but a lot of the people that supported the campaign here locally and then around the state and even outside of the state caught wind of it, like, hey, we want to support what you're doing in the human trafficking world. So that's really if I'm being honest, what probably made us, what did make us take off for that next step to start doing this full time. Full time as the CEO. We have a 9-person, board now. We have about 6 full-time employees and about 40 subcontractors that we pull from on operations, and we're running, one operation a month at least, normally a training or two a month. And so I can't say that it was ever a calling or ever like, hey, this is how you do it. It just happened, which is,
Yeah.
in my opinion, that's God that does that. But that's a
Yeah.
long story for all that. Sorry about that, but that's kind of how it happened.
Mountain Tough is the fitness app trusted by the dedicated. Mountain Tough ethos is backed by, we've always wanted to be the best in the world at helping our customers become more mentally tough. So inside the Mountain Tough app, you're not only going to find all of our physical training programs, but you're going to find additional training as well so that you can stay sharp physically, mentally, spiritually, and nutritionally. The Mountain Tough app also allows you to train no matter where you are, anytime, anywhere. Additionally, the Mountain Tough app is going to have programs from beginners all the way up to elite athletes. And all of our programming is structured in a way that you can start with no gear at body weight, and you can go all the way up to programming that is full gear. So you can do that in a robust home gym or your local gym. There's no excuse for you not to start today. With Mountain Tough, you can conquer your goals with the ideal program for your lifestyle and schedule. Train with equipment or just your body weight on your phone, tablet, TV, or web browser. Most importantly, Mountain Tough will help you train your mindset so you are always ready for anything life throws your way. Mountain Tough is offering the Mountain Tough podcast listeners an incredible offer. 6 weeks free on the Mountain Tough app. All you need to do is use the code MTNPOD to redeem your 6 weeks of training. That'll be a 14-day free trial plus a whole additional 4 weeks of training. Just go to mountaintough.com and enter code MTNPOD for your 6 weeks free on the best-in-class physical and mental training app. You've been listening to the Mountain Tough podcast. No, that's super interesting. It's like the good deeds he had planned out for you in advance. You just were walking through them. I know there's a lot of, there's going to be a ton of Mountain Tough listeners that aren't in law enforcement that want to help. What are some of the best ways that people can help you and support your mission?
Yeah, well, obviously, finances. We're running a training right now, and that's going to cost us about $15,000 to run this 2-day training here at our location for 12 law enforcement agents who needed the interview, interrogation, and decoy class. It's just a 2-day, 16-hour class. We're running a 40-hour stop training. That's sex trafficking operations program. That's our program that we put together. Those cost about $25,000 to $35,000, depending on where they're at. And then an actual operation. When we say operation, it's really training. Those cost anywhere from when we were in New Mexico, Tucumcari, New Mexico, was $84,000 because of where it was at. When we're here in, let's say we're nearby in Birmingham, Alabama, close to where we are, there's a trying to think the cost of that one. I think it's $32,000 here in Birmingham. So all of that being said, finances, because it costs money to run these, but a lot of people can't give, or like, hey, I can't give a lot. Hey, look, anything helps on that end. If you're a Christian, I ask that you pray for us because we serve the God with a never-ending oil jar. The same God that fed Elijah and the widow is the same God that will continue to take care of us. So if you are a Christian, pray. The reason I say if you're a Christian, pray for us, because if you don't know the Lord, I just ask that you ask him to reveal himself to you, and then respond to him when he does, because he will reveal himself to you in the person of Jesus Christ. But finances, prayers, and awareness, man, just spreading the word. So you might say, man, we're tight on money, I can't do anything, but you might know somebody who could support what they're doing. And then also on the operational side, we're booked up all the way through summer of next year, with law enforcement agencies doing these operations. And going back to explain operation, we train them, and then we do like an on-the-job training. We set up the op and run it, and that's where we make our arrests. We're not making the arrest, the local agency is, and we just make sure that they're building a solid prosecutable case. So I think Mike told me earlier we're at 147 felony arrests since January of last year.
Man.
And we had some more before then, but 147 felony arrests as it relates to child exploitation across this nation. So that's good. We've run about 5 rescues, and I think with advocacy groups, we got them in front of about 70 different women over those 5 rescues. I don't know if that's it. That's probably the last, 12 months from today. So that's July last year. So with that being said, that's the kind of things we do when we say operation. And that's what the funding goes toward. I would ask, because you probably have people that listen, and you can tell me if I'm wrong, that, these vigilante groups that go out, they chat some guy up, and you've seen them. They chat some guy up on, that's going to show up, meet a boy, and then they're going to show up and they're going to beat him up, make him drink his own piss or what. I saw somebody show me one. They beat this dude up and made him drink his own piss. I was like, is that hilarious? Yes. Is that effective, or does that do anything for us? No, because you can't do anything with that. One, it's probably entrapment. Every time we've taken one of those cases from somebody, it's entrapment. They always entrap that individual, number one. Number two, I can't tell you how many times you get somebody wrong or incorrect. And number three, this is something we're seeing more often than not. The person that they're bringing in, and they don't always show this, but more often than not, the person they're bringing in has a mental disability. They don't know. We had a lady reach out to us with the state level, say, hey, can you look into this guy? He's been targeting my daughter. She has a mental disability. Well, we look him up. We start running some stuff. He's got a mental disability too. And so how would you feel? And I think there was one I saw recently where they beat up this guy, and then they realized that he was, like Down syndrome or something, kind of like the Rain Man, that you can't do anything with that, right? And that's wrong and unjust in my opinion. So if you're tied to these groups, these people, let them know that they're not doing anything. They're really not. They're actually making it harder to effectively do something, because the real bad guys out there, they're getting smarter. No one cares if you put a camera in their face. We want to prosecute these guys and put them in jail for a long time. It'd be nice if we lived in the Wild West. We could say report to the parking lot for the firing squad, but we don't. And so I would say those four things.
Are the criminals that you're catching, are they getting locked up?
Of the 147 that we made over the last 18 months, I think 133 cases have all met their disposition, and they all are 100%. Like the cases we build are bang up. You talk with anybody we work with, it's like the easiest felony case you'll ever make. And there is truly a victim. That's the thing. And the victim might not always be a child. You wouldn't have found that guy who's having sex with his daughter if we didn't get him to show up for what he thought was a 14-year-old girl. But in order to get him to show up for what he thought was a 14-year-old girl, we have to make sure that the case is done appropriately, so that when he shows up, we can actually arrest him. We can then take his phone, subject to arrest, get a warrant, and rip his phone. And that's where we find the data that, oh, wow, he's been making child porn with his daughter. Jeez. A vigilante group that shows up and waves a phone in their face, filming them. You're a creep showing up for a 14-year-old girl. Yeah, well, you don't really know how much of a creep he is. And we need a successful probable cause arrest, right? We need a successful arrest to be able to dig deeper. And I will say that's one thing the FBI is unbelievably good at. is the child porn tracking down. Homeland Security is great with the missing children. That's who, I'm sworn with. Great with the missing children piece. And then your local and state agencies, they just have to learn how to be able to effectively utilize their state law to go after these individuals who are doing these nefarious acts. Another one I'll give you, we arrested a lady called and she said, "Hey, I'm an illegal immigrant. I've never reached out." It's anonymous. She said, "But I saw where y'all made this arrest on this guy. Thank you." She's 35 or 36, so she's of age. She's got kids, but this dude would take her, snatch her, black bag her, take her to a trailer, lock her up in a trailer for 3 or 4 days, and make her perform sex acts, do videos, do all that stuff, and was selling that stuff online. And she tell her, we had no idea about any of this. We arrested him showing up for a 14-year-old girl. And
insane.
She had no recourse. She's an illegal immigrant. She's afraid to call law enforcement, afraid she's going to be deported. And so, which is not the case, by the way. That's not the way it works, especially when they're a victim. There's a process that takes place that they'll look at. But all that being said, who was she going to call? She had nobody, and she just said, "Thank you. This guy has done this to me." So that is a true victim of this individual that we arrested who thought he was showing up for a 14-year-old. So that you would never figure that out. You would never get that individual if it wasn't for a successful operation that creates a prosecutable crime. Because when you have a prosecutable crime, you can start digging even further into who this individual is and find out that, holy cow, these guys are really bad people. These jokers are really bad. Funding, prayers for those of you who are believers. We're not a Christian-based organization. We're just a 501c3 nonprofit, but we all happen to be Christians who work for this organization. Prayer is key if you're a believer. Spread the word, awareness, and then make sure that you let people know that these vigilante groups, I appreciate their heart, but they're not helping. They're actually hurting the cause. Because law enforcement can't do anything with it. And people say, "Oh, well, it's all the red tape." No, it's actually the 4th and 5th Amendment of the Constitution, generally speaking. It's not really much red tape. It's just our Constitution, which is a good thing. And I don't want to see that, those protections will never be removed because they're inalienable rights given to us by God. But I don't want to see the things that outline what those protections are being removed from somebody. And so with that being said, that's, those are the 4 things that people could do for us is making sure that you spread the word, but also making sure that we're not doing things on our own accord because it doesn't work. It makes it worse.
And it's a big deal. I think you have a statistic for every criminal you lock up that saves an additional 25 victims. Is that accurate?
Yeah, I mean, that's a buddy of mine with the FBI told me that about 10 years ago before I really got into what we're doing now heavily. He said, "Hey, for every individual on the street that you lock up that's into kids, child porn, whatever, right? For every one of those individuals that you get, that's 25 victims that they would have victimized." And so when you look at that, if we make 10 arrests, which is about the average of what we'll do per operation, well, that's 250 potential victims. I talked with him probably about a year ago now. He's retired. He said he thinks that the statistics gone up even more, especially with media and the things, social media and kind of the access that they have to everybody has to each other. And he says it's about 110 or 120. We haven't put that out because I don't know if that's the case. But what I can tell you is this: everybody we arrest, I say everybody, I won't say everybody, I would say 95% of the individuals we arrest have done this multiple times to multiple people, whether underage or of age. They have victimized multiple people multiple times. The small percentage, the 5% that haven't, I would say are generally speaking your 18, your 19-year-old kid, your 20-year-old kid. A lot of times you got young guys that'll get on these and there's a 4-year difference between me and my wife, right? I mean, she's 30, what is she? It might be, she's 34 and I'm 38. So there's a 4-year difference between us, and you might see that going on. You might see a 14-year-old girl chat, but some 18 or 19-year-old dude showing up. It's not really a 14-year-old girl, but there's some grace that can be given there. I don't think we ruin this kid's life over that. We just say, we make sure that he's not victimizing his little sisters or cousins or whoever at home, but we say, hey, this is a reset course for you, buddy. And we've seen that happen a lot with prosecutors. They're willing to work with those younger guys. Those are the only ones that you have that small percentage that haven't done it before. This is just some, horny kid who sees halfway decent looking chick online and doesn't really care if she's 14, 15, or 16, whatever. He's just showing up because, kids are dumb, right?
Yeah, he's not a repeat offender.
That's right. The dudes the people, I should say, we really want to go after gang members who are victimizing these. When we have that happen, quite often gangs show up to pick them up, not so much to sleep with them, but they're going to take them and sell them and run them. The 50-year-old dude, we rolled a guy as a 75-year-old doctor, right? Those are the ones that we really want to concentrate on, because those are the ones who are continuing to victimize young men and women in our society.
Do you feel like the porn addiction, like pandemic, is accelerating a lot of this?
Yeah, I mean, I would say it probably doesn't help. I couldn't give you a good answer on any legitimate statistical research, I guess, that I've seen or done or even been a part of. But I would say, from what we've seen, these guys that are showing up, because again, it's primarily a male demographic showing up for a female, even though we will run male decoys and we'll have males show up for them and females. There is a porn aspect to it, right? These guys are heavily involved when you rip their phones in not just porn, but like next level stuff, like even really dark stuff. Does that make sense? When we see some of the things that they have on their phones. Something else we see is couples, and so my thought would be is that porn would be something that drives these couples to that, like a husband-wife pair show up for, two little girls, and that's something that we've encountered, maybe not as much, but when you start digging into their relationship, it's heavy porn based, weird things that you don't normally see in a marriage relationship, I would say, where they're really into those things. Does that make sense? So I would say yes, from what we've seen, but I can't say that for sure.
Yeah, it's insane. Crazy. Well, man, this is a good wake up call, I think, for a lot of listeners. It's amazing the work that you guys are doing. It's amazing that kind of God put that plan in front of you, and you have been obedient to that, and it's incredible.
Yeah, it's definitely His plan. I can tell you that. Nothing that I've done. It just happened to. Proverbs 21:31, horse is made ready for day of battle, but victory rests in the Lord. And so He's been granting us victory and laying our path before us. So I can't claim anything of this. We got a great team, and they're all on board in the same manner. This is definitely the Lord moving this thing forward. So,
yeah, and you've had an incredible life as a protector, like a sentinel. Have you felt that? Have you felt that call since you were a kid to protect?
I mean, maybe it was in my proclivities. I'm a firm believer in this. I don't know if it was a call necessarily. I guess you could, maybe it was. Maybe that's why I went the route I did. But I do believe this, that God, the psalmist says He knit you in your mother's womb. He knew you before the foundation of the earth. God put you together. God put you on this earth for a reason. If there's anybody out there wondering why they're here, I can tell you this: there's a reason why you're here. And it might not be to fight human trafficking. It might not be to be a Navy SEAL. It might not be to stay dangerous, right, and do the things that you're doing in physical and spiritual. It might not be those, and then again, it might be. That's for you to figure out, and that's an important thing. But you are made in His image. You're a fingerprint. As stupid and as this sounds, you're a snowflake, not in a bad way, but you're unique. You're your own individual, and I believe that God made me the way He did Training didn't bring it out. All training did was just, pick out the guys when we have, 10% of our buzz class go, pick out the individuals that were already made this way. Does that make sense? And you probably see that in what you do, what you do. A lot of individuals that work in the fitness community, they're already made that way. Doesn't mean that everybody has to be Arnold Schwarzenegger or my buddy Josh Bridges, the old, CrossFit guy. Everybody ain't got to be that guy.
Yeah.
But you were made that specific way. And with that being said, especially with a society that blurs roles, I will say this: you said a protector, kind of that position. If you're a man, that is innate in you. You're not a nurturer, you're a protector. If you're a woman, that is innate in you. You're a nurturer, right? Not so much a protector. And those two things together are what keeps society going, what keep our families going, obviously, but what keeps society going. So our culture wants to blur the roles and lines. That can't happen. So I would say yes, that calling to be a protector, just because I'm a man, especially as a father. Now you have to be. Beforehand, I didn't necessarily have to. I get a wife, I get daughters. Yeah, I got to be a protector because everybody's after them. And if I'm not, woe be it to me. I get very mad at guys who don't protect and provide for their family in the way that they're supposed to, because they rely on you to protect and provide. I would die a terrible death to save my wife and daughters. That's the way every man should feel. And if you don't feel that way, check yourself and make sure that you are fulfilling that role. So sorry again for the long answer, but yeah, I would say that it's who God made me. One, as a man, and then two, knitting me in my mother's womb to be who's sitting before you today. And Christ is working on it every single day, because I'm far, far from where I need to be. But, he works on me daily. Let's put it that way.
Likewise for me. I mean, that I couldn't think of a better note to close out on than that. That was beautiful the way you articulated that. And we'll continue to support you guys here at Mountain Tough, and I'll continue to rock my Crush Evil hat every day and chat with people about the work that you guys are doing. And we're proud of you guys, and anything we can do to help, or any messages we can help pump out for you guys, definitely let us know. And really appreciate you being on the show today.
Man, thanks for having me, brother. And, thanks for the support you've given us, and let us know if you need things. Sorry I couldn't make it up for some of the events y'all had going. It's just been man, we're running 90-0. So,
I bet.
As I know y'all are too.
Yeah, running and gunning. Well, thanks, Jared. I appreciate you, man. Wow, what an incredible conversation. There is a lot of detail in that, a lot to think about. That's one of those conversations that you guys need to process for a while. I know we talk about every week after these episodes, the golden nuggets you need to pull out. As a parent, after hearing Jared's conversation, the amount of golden nuggets in there are abundant. So this is certainly one that if you are a parent and you listen to the episode today, make sure you take time to process this one. Make sure you take time to process this with your spouse, particularly around ways that you should be protecting your household. The big one that stood out for me, for sure, there's a lot in there, but Jared talked specifically around, as parents, it is not our job to be our kids' friends. And that factor is leading to some of these issues, this idea that our kids need to be our friend. And he backed it up biblically too, where it is our job to put that discipline in place so that these issues potentially don't even have the chance to happen. So a lot in there, powerful conversation. Thanks so much for being here. Thanks so much for being here week after week. We love you guys, and we'll see you on the next episode. Thanks for listening to the Mountain Tough Podcast. We'll see you next week.